Welcome to the June 3rd meeting of the Murfreesboro City Council. Councilmember Ronnie Martin has our prayer and our pledge. Councilman Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. Please bow. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to assemble and the freedoms that we enjoy. We thank you for all those that serve our community. I'm very thankful for those that I serve with as elected leaders in the city and the county. I hope that you will be with those that look out for us and protect us on a daily basis, keep us safe. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Yes, sir.
All right, you have the consent agenda in front of you. Are there any items that need to be moved on or off the consent agenda?
If not, so moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, you have the minutes of the April 22nd, 2021 meeting.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move into old business. You have ordinance 21006, the solid waste ordinance revisions. This is second and final reading. Mr. Gore.
Mayor, thank you for the opportunity tonight. There are a couple of changes I'd like to bring to council's attention from first reading to the second reading of the ordinance. It mainly has to do with fees. We, in looking at the ordinance and talking about go-back service, meaning when a resident or a commercial business does not put their container out by the curb, we now have that ability with our system to document that it was not at the curbside service. And if they call us and require a exclusive or independent go-back to pick that up, we're looking at $25 per occurrence for residential and $50 per occurrence for commercial. Also, on the commercial drop-off facility at our mulching site at Florence Road, putting a scale house out there by the scales was going to be a little cost prohibitive, so we decided we would change that to the 8 cubic yard, 16 cubic yard, and 22 cubic yards, or a full load service consistent with how we were going to charge residential. So those are the only real changes from first reading to second reading, but I wanted to highlight those. Lastly, we are recommending, though, an approval to making the effective date August 1st, 2021 versus July 1st. We thought there may be some movement on the solid waste fee, the monthly fee, so we kind of held up on doing any public notice. Since that did not change, we did put a press release out last week, but we want to get into our July billing inserts for the water bills. Notice about the changes in the yard and brush and lemon pickup. And I met with CUD today as well, and they're going to be putting postcards together to send out to citizens that notify them of the changes to the brush and limb service fees. So I can answer any questions.
Any questions?
There are none. Make a motion to approve.
This is to approve the amendments before second reading, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Second.
All right, this is a vote on the amendment, then we'll vote on the ordinance. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now vote on ordinance 21006 as amended for the solid waste ordinance revisions. The solid waste ordinance as amended.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We now have ordinance 21012 for the fiscal year 22 recommended rate and price increases. This is second and final reading.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
No.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
No.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we'll move into land use matters. We have ordinance 21OZ09 amending, thank you, Mr. Gore, amending the One East College PUD zoning along East College Street. This is second and final reading for planning.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. We'll move to ordinance 21OZ11 to zone approximately 52.9 acres located along Veterans Parkway and Burnt Knob Road.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris?
No.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
No.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. We'll move to ordinance 21OZ08 to rezone approximately .66 acres located along the west side of Lee Street, north of Jackson Street. This is second and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. I think this was the one you abstained. Okay. All right. All right, we'll move into new business. Resolution 21R22 fiscal year 21 city schools budget, number 8.
Hi, good evening, everyone. City Schools brings before you tonight 2 budget amendments. Both of these are new grant revenues that will be recorded in the General Purpose Operating Fund. The first grant we have is some additional money for the summer.
You'll pull that microphone up a little bit. There you go. Perfect.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Oh, it does sound better.
Yeah.
So the first grant we bring before you is additional money for the summer learning program, bringing that total grant to $1.8 million. The second pot of money is some transportation grant money, also state money, for $304,000. And as presented, it's paying for labor benefits and some fuel costs for our transportation. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any question on this budget amendment?
No questions, move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we'll move into land use matters. We have sewer allocation variance, North Tennessee Boulevard, the Point at Raiders Campus Apartments.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I stand before you with the request for a sewer allocation variance for the Point at Raiders Campus Apartments, an existing apartment complex at 2315 North Tennessee Boulevard. Murfreesboro Water Resources Department has vetted and approved this opportunity. I stand for any questions.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
No.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we'll move into sewer allocation variance for Memorial Boulevard, Brookhaven, Lot 1.
Mayor, Council, I stand before you with a request for a sewer allocation variance located off from Memorial Boulevard for Brookhaven Lot 1. Water Resources has already vetted and approved the opportunity. I stand for any questions.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Mayor McFarland?
Abstain. All right. We'll now move into on motion, so we have the option for the right-of-way along Butler Drive.
Good evening, Mayor McFarland, members of council. We'll have for you tonight a real estate option for a portion of right-of-way for the realignment of Butler Drive associated with the Molly property on Butler Drive. This would preserve the right-of-way for a future realignment of Butler Drive. And we recommend approval.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll now move into a review of the city recorder, city treasurer candidates. Ms. Russell.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. As you know, Melissa Wright serves as both the city recorder and city treasurer, recently put in her notice to retire. Baker Tilly was selected as a consultant to work with Human Resources to provide council with potential candidates for the position. After reviewing all the applications and information submitted, council was sent the top 5 candidates for review. Patty Himenover with Baker Tilly is here to provide you with a recap of each candidate in addition to answering any questions that you may have. In front of you, you have a list of candidate numbers and names. Patty will identify each candidate by number rather than by name in the event a candidate doesn't make it further along in the process. Their current employer doesn't hear that they applied. Once your questions have been answered, council can select those candidates that you would like to move forward and conduct formal interviews in person or via Zoom. If you move forward, I would recommend Zoom for the sake of time and coordination. However, if in-person interviews are selected, we'll coordinate dates, flights, and hotel stays. Another option would be for you to select the internal candidate if you believe they are the most qualified and feel you don't need to continue on with the search. With that said, I'll have Patty come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's really good to be here in person to see each and every one of you. It's been a real fun search for the Finance Director. I just want to talk a little bit about the process so the community understands what we went through to get to this point. We were selected, Baker Tilly, as the firm to go out as a national search to find the Finance Director. And from there, what we did is I interviewed each and every one of the council, the mayor, and the city manager, along with a few staff members. I also had the honor to have a long conversation with Melissa also to find out of exactly what the job entailed. From there, we put together a brochure, and the brochure laid out all the requirements, the attributes, the leadership qualities that you are looking for in this type of position. From there, we did a national search. Then from there, we also advertised it all over the major organizations that you and we belong to. We also advertised it through LinkedIn, and then we did email, personal emails to individuals that we felt were qualified. We also made numerous calls from around this area in Tennessee of local finance directors themselves. From there, individuals had the opportunity to submit their resume and cover letter in our system. From there, we took a look at their qualifications. Before that, what we also did is we put together a questionnaire. And the questionnaire had questions that we wanted to know if they had in-depth experience. What kind of experience did they have with budgeting, bonding, investments, audit, those kinds of things. So when we were comparing each of the candidates, we wanted to compare them apples to apples, and we wanted to see the depth of knowledge that they had and their writing styles. From there, we asked them to complete a due diligence report. What that was is their salary expectations. Also, if they were ever dismissed from an employment, any kind of separation, we wanted to know that up front. We also asked them ahead of time if we did a Google search, if there would be anything out there that would embarrass our organization and the city. We do that ahead of time before we actually do the Nexus search. We also asked the candidates to do a computer interview and to see if they can really think on their feet. They did not have the questions in front of them. They had 30 seconds to read the question and up to 3 minutes per question. And they could not turn the machine off. They had to keep it running at all times. So when you ask the candidates, they will say that's the one thing they do not like. Then from there, we took a look at all of the candidates side by side and to evaluate if they met the criteria. And then from there is what we brought in front of you are some candidates that I would like to just highlight that are in front of you. Candidate 1 that is in your packet is from this area and does have a CPA, and that is something that was strongly and required for this type of position. Also has a BA, accounting, worked at an audit firm for 6 years, working with audits with cities and schools. Is involved with nonprofits also. This individual does not have direct experience with elected officials, but no bonding experience. I had an opportunity to sit and meet with each and every one of them because I wanted to understand why they want to come here and the desire and the motivation. And if there were any gaps or any reasons that I would have to question anything on their documents, this was the time for me to ask them questions. Candidate 2 actually is from this area too. This person works at a city, has a CPA license, also has a master's degree in accounting, and has experience working in the government setting, and has experience working with the elected officials and large budgets, and that's important. And that's something that we looked at too, is the size of the budget. And then has experience leading the audit preparation, and then also experienced with bond issues and investments. The other thing that we're looking at in these candidates too is what kind of awards they receive. And as a council, you might not think that might not be a big deal, but for us it is when we're attracting a finance director. What kind of awards do they actually receive in their department? In particular, the GFOA one, which is the Certified Achievement for Excellence in Accounting, and for their annual reporting. In this particular city, they received this award 22 consecutive years. Now that's impressive, and the reason we look at those kinds of things is because the city expects high expectation from the department, and the department has these high expectations themselves, and that is very impressive. Candidate 3 is a CPA, has a CPA license, an accounting degree, has worked with auditing firms, auditing schools, counties, and local government, has 11 years with city experience as an accounting manager, a chief accountant, a controller, a deputy director of finance operations. Now with this 11 years with the city, they've been promoted all the way up. And that's what we're also looking for is there any promotions throughout their course of their career. This individual is from out of state, has also 2 years working as an auditor, working at cities, counties, and local government. And that's what I do. We like to see those kinds of experiences also because they get to see the back end of the audits and how they are put together. I mean, they're the ones that are auditing all that information, so that's important for them to see. This individual also works with large budgets. This individual also won the GFOA, this city, over 32 years, so they too have high expectations. This individual is in the preparation of issuing $180 million in bonds, so she is the point person of issuing those bonds, working with the rating agencies. Candidate 4 is from out of state, does not have a CPA license, has a master's in business administration from Harvard, has some years of experience as a city treasurer and audit for a city of 110,000 population, is very good skilled with the software experience, and works with budget up to $2 billion. Experience with bonding also. The 5th candidate is from out of state, has a BA in mathematics, has an MBA, but no CPA. HR experience, and is currently a finance director at a city. Has an experience with bonding, and I asked this individual, I said, why are you interested in coming here? I mean, and this particular spouse just got transferred here. And she absolutely loves working with cities, so that is the reason that she wanted to apply. And she did a lot of research on the city, and this is where they're going to be moving. So that gives you a little breakdown of the candidates. Just want to open it up to see if you have any specific questions for me on any of these candidates or the process.
I have a question. I think it's candidate, number four. In listening to your criteria that you gave before you started telling us about the individuals, I was curious as to how number 4 made the cut when the person was dismissed from his job, from his or her job.
We did talk a little bit about that particular situation, and he did give us and me an explanation of the rationale on why he's done, and we felt that he had a lot of experience for you to take a look at. Also with working as a city treasurer and an audit for the city. And he does bring some of those experiences that you were looking for.
Thank you.
Good question.
And I have another one. I think Ronnie and I, we were not able to pull up the interviews, but in reading the criteria and everything, candidates 1, 2, and 3, what size city experience does candidate number 1 have? What size city?
I think that was no municipals.
Do I?
I don't think it was that they ever worked with a government.
That particular one worked at a state.
Okay.
At the state level.
All right. What about number 2?
Number 2, that is, just a second.
Never mind.
130. It's 130.
That's okay.
Approximately 130.
Okay. I meant number 3, candidate number 3.
Number 3, that one is 140, a little over 140.
Thank you.
1,000.
Right.
I watched, I just make a comment, I watched all, on the Hire app or Evaluate app, so I watched all the interviews and all the questions, much to my wife's dismay last night at 8 o'clock as we're watching through all this. I did not realize candidate 2 had as much qualifications as that candidate has, and so I was extremely impressed with that candidate. Especially, I think there was one portion, a space company that I really like the private sector experience the public sector experience, the state experience, as well as the municipal experience.
The other thing with candidate 2, we did talk a little bit about, the longevity, because I know that Melissa has been here for a long time, and she's very passionate about the person that's going to take over the position, and you can tell that. And that was it came through on all of my interviews, is wanting someone here that has the passion to be here, to be involved in the community. And I did see some short employment on number 2, and there's reasons of moving, of military reasons, and that was absolutely a good reason of why. But this is home for this individual and has family here too.
Craig, this would be a question. What is the overall compensation for this position? Or what's the range? The range, because it seemed like 4 out of the 6, one person it was negotiable, and one person they're familiar with the pay range and they were acceptable, but it seemed like the other 3, the numbers they had were higher than the pay range. But I'm not familiar what that overall pay range is.
Give me just a second here, I'll pull it up. Or Pam Randolph may have it.
The pay range where we advertised the position for was $116,594 to $169,061.
Okay.
And that was something that was in the brochure, and that's why we asked that question, and that was the other question that I did ask each of them about.
Does anybody have any comments that would lead to someone other than candidate number 2 or to take any process that we wouldn't kind of go ahead and we've got recommendations from prior to consider. We've got, I agree with Mayor on this. I was really pleased when I read it, and I think, honestly, I didn't know all that till I saw it, and that's why I think we went through this process, and I learned a lot from it. So
Yeah.
I'm ready to move on with candidate number 2, and
Yeah, I immediately.
if you guys are.
Yeah, I immediately eliminated 4 and 5 because we were looking for CPA, and then when I was comparing 1, 2, and 3, I was very impressed with 2 and 3. Then when I was looking at 2 and 3, comparing them, 2 kind of blew them out the water with, I think, well, we were looking for CPA, and number 2 had the master's, but not only that, was very skilled and experienced in bonds and investments. But what really got me about number 2 was that all the accolades, the awards, those speak for themselves. So I agree with
All right. Y'all, unless there's some other comments, I'm gonna make a motion that we move forward on candidate number 2.
I second.
Any discussion? Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Tyndall, what will be the next step on, what do we need to authorize is with Mr. LaLance with his motion for a negotiation? How do we?
I think in the past, the city hasn't had a contract always with the recorder and treasurer, but the common practice now is to have a contract and employment for appointed officials. So the next step, if council wants to go that direction, the next step would be to ask Adam to enter into negotiations for a contract and contractual terms, and then bring it back to council for their vote.
We've got a standard contract that we've used for Mr. Tucker, Mr. Tyndall, the last 2 positions. Is it safe to say we could use that
I think it would certainly be a starting point, yes.
Okay. Is that okay with the council?
Great.
Okay. Is it okay now to say candidate 2 is Jennifer Brown, who is the interim director.
No, no.
Ms. Brown, congratulations. We went through a process, and we've been consistent on doing that to understand it's sometimes you don't know what you have till you understand what you have. And I will say I emailed Pam last night. I think, well, it's public record, Pam, so it doesn't matter. I just asked Pam's opinion. I said it seems to me that Ms. Brown is the most qualified out of the 5, and Pam said, hands down, that's what she saw at the same time. So congratulations. We know you're already part of the team, and I know Ms. Wright is ready to be able to go spend time with her grandkids. So
I'm delighted to say I agree with your decision, and I knew what I had, so I'm thrilled to find out now that y'all know too.
Thank you.
awesome.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
A female! Oh, excuse me. I haven't had my medicine, I'm sorry.
All right, Mr. Tucker, is it safe to say that you could have that at our workshop meeting for Wednesday on other business?
Potentially, it depends how quickly we can come to terms, but from just the drafting standpoint, yes.
Okay. And Ms. Russell, I assume we would want you to be involved in that discussion as well. Okay. All right, we'll move into, thank you also for your help on assisting with the search. I want to say that the interview, I like reading through everything, but it was also good to be able to put a face with the candidates as you read and also see how they interact. That was a big deal for me to see those individuals and thinking that as they come up and speak to us, how that would work. And I feel like y'all gave a good list of candidates. So, all right, we'll move to the contract for vehicle purchases for Parks and Recreation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Parks and Recreation Department proposes the purchase of 2 vehicles, an F-250 crew cab and a 15-passenger van. The crew cab truck will be utilized by the Athletic Maintenance Division and will replace a 1994 GMC 3/4 ton with over 200,000 miles on it. The van will provide transport for the department's participants in the after-school program at McFadden Community Center and various activities and programs. This purchase will be a state cooperative purchase, which is permitted by the city's purchasing code and state law. Funding for the cost of these vehicles is $61,994 and is provided in the 2022 CIP.
I appreciate the negotiated price, or whatever price you got, is $18,000 cheaper than what the list was, so I move for approval.
Second.
Motion second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move to Bernhard MMC LLC AIA contract for the Patterson Park Cooling Tower and unit replacement.
Yes, the staff recommendation is to approve the construction contract with Bernhard MMC. Patterson Park's chiller has a main distribution manifold, internal water pump, baffles for the fill liner that are irreparable, forcing the chiller to operate at only 50 to 60% capacity. Additionally, only 3 of the 7 rooftop compressors are operational, leading to undesirable temperature conditions inside the facility. The department followed the purchasing codes, and Bernhard MMC was the only bidder for the work, with a proposal totaling $245,128. Funding for the cost of the repairs is allocated in the department's 2021 operating budget. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move to a purchase of a storm sewer camera inspection system. Mr. Schillis.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Hope to find you well. Street Department is seeking your approval to purchase a new stormwater sewer camera system. This was put out for invitation bid back in March the 31st. The bid was awarded to the lowest responsible bidder, Sampson Equipment, in the amount of $196,436. And we would like to, this will be funded from the Stormwater Fund, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have for me.
No comment, I move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move to the Town Creek daylighting proposal from Griggs and Maloney.
Mayor, Council, thank you for the opportunity to come before you again. The item before you currently is the town, associated with the Town Creek daylighting project, you know, at the corner of Church and Broad. This is to relocate a 16-inch diameter water line that has to be lowered under the creek that is to be daylighted. So, and also prepare a point repair to a sanitary sewer and some legal instruments to abandon the easement. So the fee, the design fee, is in addition to Griggs and Maloney's current fee in the amount of $14,500, and the design fee is designated to come from the Stormwater Reserve account. So I'm available for questions if you have any.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now move to item 23, the modernization of the elevators at the Water Resource Recovery Facility.
Yes, sir, thank you. We have two elevators, one at our admin lab building and one at our main lift station. They're 20 and 30 years old respectively. They just need updating. So we have this budgeted for $210,000. We did have just one bidder. We did put out invitation to bids, and we just had one bidder come back. United Elevator Services at $190,000, and we would request your approval to move forward.
I have to admit something. I read this, I was like, oh, it must be some fancy water, filtration elevator that kind of moves the... No, it's an elevator.
It's an elevator.
Just saying.
Just an old elevator.
I'll move for approval. Either way, I'll move for approval.
Second.
We have a modern motion and a modern second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we have a sole source purchase with HACH Inc. for equipment and software.
I got my slides mixed up here, but yes, it's a real-time control of polymer dosing for our biosolids. So this is a situation where we do add polymer to our biosolids. It creates a more efficient and effective process to dewater in our rotary presses. This actually, we have $190,000 budgeted for polymer each year. So this is a pretty expensive unit at $74,435. We did budget $90,000, so it's under budget. But we hope that this will decrease or diminish our overall polymer feed costs, basically doing a real-time control and no longer having to do manual assessment of how much polymer to feed. So we're hoping it pays itself back. But I'm available for questions if you have any.
I'll move for approval. Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll move to a sole source purchase with Vortex Services for sonar, LiDAR, CCTV, water resources.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. And this may require two, we put two recommendations here, so it may take two motions. But this is to go back and look at our Hobos pipe, which is a fiber reinforced pipe of large diameter, between 30 and 48 inch. We had two catastrophic failures about 3 years ago that were very expensive. So this Vortex company, they've got it's a CCTV television. They actually do a sonar for the area of the pipe that's underwater, and they do a LiDAR, which is basically using lasers to determine if there's any egging or warping of the pipe itself. It's very, very precise. So we have, there were 16,800 feet that we did not get to. on the first run, so we're asking for the sole source procurement to use them again. We also are looking at going back and looking at the worst of the linear footage from the first go-around, which was 5,800 feet. We had an ovality of 7.5%, which is really just an egging of the pipe. We want to go back and make sure that that condition has not worsened, that we still, once you get past 9%, you cannot do an in-place treatment or put a liner through the pipe. You actually have to dig and replace it. So that's a very expensive proposition, and we just want to make sure that 5,800 feet has stayed at 7.5% and not gotten worse. So it's a total of 22,611 feet. The price tag is $174,330 with Vortex. The cost of the LGA's inspection and reporting and actually going out there with the contractor is, I don't see if I've got that number. I know that the total is 222,580, so about $46,000 for engineering and inspection. So we would ask for both of those approvals, and I can answer any questions if you have them.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance. Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll move to the sole source purchase with Southern Sales Company for UV parts.
Yes, these are original equipment manufacturing parts. This is our disinfection system. Prior to releasing our effluent into the stream, we do not use chlorine or any type of disinfectant that would cause a residual. That would be harmful to the fish and the bugs in the stream. So we actually run all of our effluent through these ultraviolet lamps, and that disinfects and takes out any bacteria or viruses. This is, again, a sole source purchase due to the OEM nature of the equipment. We budgeted $90,000, but the price tag is only $60,342. So we would request your approval.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Any
Thank you
license?
very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Gore,
Yes, ma'am.
good job. You went under budget $65,223 tonight. Very
Well,
good.
My staff went under 65. They're the ones that are putting these numbers together, so they do a good, they conservatively budget, so thank you.
As political officials, you had our attention when many of us don't know what LIDAR is, but we thought that could be something you were going to strap us all to here before too long.
It's laser something.
Okay.
All right.
And I thought we were going to get through one of your presentations. You had 6 items on the agenda tonight, and you made it through 4 without a PowerPoint. The last 2 got you though, man.
Oh, sorry. I'd actually had slides up. They just must not have showed them to you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. We didn't talk about the membranes tonight. Thank you.
All right, so I guess we have some licensing for beer permits.
We do. We have a new location at 1524 BZ Road that's going to be categorized as a grocery market. We also have an ownership change for a restaurant at 1720 Oakport Parkway. Neither of those have finished their building codes inspections, but their background checks are good for the permit issuance. So when they finish codes, we'll issue that permit if you approve it tonight. Also, we have a special event permit that will happen on July 17th by Main Street for the Taste of Rutherford fundraiser at Cannonsburg. That's all we have. We recommend approval.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. I have one recommendation for the pension committee. Several years ago, we had the recommendation to put an employee representative on the pension board. I think we've had firefighter, police officer,
Water,
water, sewer,
recreation.
Yeah, so this is probably the 6th employee, but the recommendation is Valerie Smith with water and sewer was on the last one-year term, and we're recommending Kathy Smith no relation to the pension board.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Any statements to be paid?
No, sir.
Any other business from staff?
Nope.
Any business from council? Okay. All right, seeing none, I'll adjourn here in a second, but we have a meeting Wednesday, 11:30 at the airport, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Just one reminder, Friday night is the first concert in our downtown. Great group going to be there, so hopefully everybody will come out at 6:30 to 9:30 on the public square.
All right. Seeing no more business, we'll stand adjourned.